Welcome to Horse Vet, a new series about horses and the veterinarians who care for them. Rosie is out of control, one side completely covered in mud, and she's having a major seizure. Her horse vet is Dr. John Newcomb.
The difficult part about seizures in horses is that even if you can kind of say, hey, this is where I think it's coming from, trying to control them is very difficult, and it's not something we do in the field. Not at all. I mean, we don't carry the drugs, the phenobarbital or Valium or anything like that to treat seizures in a horse in the field. We just don't do it. It's not something that you see in the field. She might go through this for a day or so, and then things might be quieted down since we're not really knowing what causing it. Obviously, seizures and change in brainwave electricity or electrical activity. There's all kinds of possible options as far as causes, and you know, it's just, I would be guessing to try to pinpoint what's going on with her. It becomes a real difficult scenario. Draw the line is when they start becoming unsafe for us to handle or be around, or unsafe for herself, because we don't want to see her hurt herself. If she continues to have this activity, this abnormal activity where she's going to be hurting herself, then it's not really fair to her without doing something for her. Seizures in a horse are so rare that we just don't even worry about carrying medication for them. First of all the medication required is this very restricted medication, and it's just such a hassle to try to carry stuff like that. It's just not worth it to us, and we never see them. And as soon as we see them, boy, those things are hospitalized immediately, so they can be monitored around the clock, you know, every minute of the night. I try to let the horse kind of determine its own destiny a little bit. If they get worse, then it's a really easy solution. They've told you what needs to be done. You know, you need to put them down. If they get better and they're doing okay, then maybe there's a remote chance that she could be okay. Euthanasia is very humane as well, if you've never been through that. So she hasn't had any episodes that we know of in well, basically like 36 hours, Saturday night. She's pretty quiet and peaceful right now. This morning she's pretty relaxed and just pretty much walking around in a normal manner. Everything seems pretty normal. She's sure listening to the left, huh? Interesting. Well, she's still using her ears. She kind of acts like she's a little bit aware of what's going on around her. The whole time she's been wanting to go to the right, cock that head to the right. What I observed that one evening, you know, after this, that evening, but yet they never turned into anything severe. Just the head twitches. My impression of the video is that the mare obviously has an acute neurological abnormality. Origin of it looks like it does involve the facial nerves to some extent, but obviously involves her balance and locomotion as well. So there's more than one location, so it would be a difficult scenario to try to pinpoint what the problem is without doing some very involved diagnostics, CT scan, x-rays, etc. No gross evidence of trauma, so I'm not convinced that there's a trauma episode, so things you have to be concerned about are obviously viral abnormalities as well as infections. The video reconfirms the fact that it's a very serious abnormality. I had not seen any evidence of the severity of her problem prior to this, so it definitely changes my perspective as far as how serious it can get and how dangerous it can get for both the horse and maybe a handler. So it basically reconfirms that we have a serious abnormality that if the owner isn't willing to pursue any diagnostics, probably the best option for the mare, long-term and short-term, would be euthanasia. She could easily hurt herself, break a leg, head trauma, neck trauma. It could definitely be life-threatening to her from other standpoints besides just the neurological issues. And obviously a person could get hurt handling her as well. We'll get some sedation drawn up and the euthanasia solution. And do the only bad thing that we have to do once in a while. I shouldn't say bad thing, it's a good thing in that sense, but you feel bad that you don't have a chance to figure out exactly what's wrong with the horse and exactly what's wrong before these things are done. Hello? What? Now this is a unique situation, is the company that we usually have pick up the horse or dispose of the horse can't get here right away. Now, the good news is the mare's not suffering. I mean, she could have another episode or two between now and then, but they can't get here till at least Wednesday, but they said they'd even prefer to wait till Friday. It was pretty close, huh? Wow. Drop the drugs and... We get to bring foals into the world and be there when they're first born and watch them grow up and be obviously usable horses. And then there comes the time, and what we have to keep remembering is that we have horses are obviously domesticated animals now, so they're in our complete care, and that care is much more involved than people probably think to from day to day. And this is the typical scenario where you get to a point where what's the best for the horse? Well, the horse in a reality, in a situation where she's in the wild, she obviously wouldn't have made it this far. We're going to give her a pre-med to start with, and then the pre-med is just a sedative, and then we're going to give her 100 cc's of a euthanasia solution, which basically will stop her respiration and will stop her heart after a few minutes. And it's very humane in the sense of they really don't know what's going on, much like anesthesia type of euthanasia. The thing about euthanasia is just like anesthetizing a horse is you're taking a 1,000-pound animal and you're giving something that's going to create them to fall pretty abruptly. And so even though it seems like it's, like I said, you're humanely putting the horse down, it's still very difficult at times because they don't always go down the way you want them to. They can actually fall abnormally, fall backwards, rear up and fall down, and have an abnormal response to it. If she doesn't like your hand up there, take your hand off her then. Just to get her to bring her head back down here for a second. There's half the dose. Here's the other half the dose. Cap that, get that all. She's gonna take a couple deep, pretty, and hopefully go down the way you want her to. You notice her breathing is pretty well stopped. She might take what we call an agonal breath. After a few minutes, it'll be a really deep, quick, abrupt breath. But for the most part, her breathing will be pretty well stopped by the time they actually make it onto the ground. Her heart is obviously still beating though, and it'll take a few minutes for that to stop.
Dr. Newcomb, equine practitioner, contacted this lab for diagnostic assistance with a mare that had been through an episode of seizuring and had been humanely euthanized and brought to the lab for necropsy evaluation. We received the horse around 5 p.m. on Friday evening, and we logged it into the computer with a unique identifier so we could always identify the horse, and we began the necropsy examination. A necropsy examination is a post-mortem examination of an animal equivalent to an autopsy in a human. And we were particularly interested in the central nervous system, particularly the brain, because it had seizures. And we began to take the brain out immediately, and then we place that in a preservative solution so that we can always examine every part of it. The next step after the staining and the cover slipping of the sections is to have a pathologist examine the sections under the microscope to determine the nature of the process. We do have some brain here, a piece of midbrain, hindbrain, cerebral cortex, midbrain. I see no inflammation. I'm looking at this section on a low magnification. If I see something abnormal, I'll then move the magnification to a higher power. Possible causes of seizure in an old horse would include a brain tumor, a brain abscess, a viral encephalitis, for example, West Nile virus or equine encephalomyelitis, a injury from a kick to the head, a toxic plant such as yellow star thistle, and that would be about it.
The diagnosis that they have as their final diagnosis was localized area of chronic hemorrhage in the base of the brain, that basal ganglia area that was more than likely responsible for the involuntary motor activity. The etiology is the only concern, is they don't know why. They can't tell us why by the slides and looking at the tissue. And they said possibly related to trauma. There was no gross evidence of trauma. There could have been multiple other factors that could have accounted for that hemorrhage and that basal gang, but that we felt was the reason that the mare was showing the clinical signs that she was showing, primarily the involuntary motor activity, which in all safeness for the mare and safeness for people handling her, our decision to have the mare euthanized was definitely the best decision for everybody involved.